Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast training series. I am your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos. And in this episode, we are going to be looking at penetrating Psychic Blast. Penetrating Psychic Blast is by far one of the most used powers in the game of HeroClix for good reason. It allows you to completely ignore damage reduction, to deliver the full payload of damage that you have on your figure to your opponent's figure. It is a power that can be game-changing, or it can be a power that can be completely ineffective. And I really want to add emphasis on that, depending on your opponent's lineup. Okay, with that being said, let's get into it. Penetrating Psychic Blast. Give this character a ranged combat action. Damage from the attack is penetrating damage. Alright, so I already sort of explained to you what Psychic Blast does. Let's really go into depth about how to use Psychic Blast for its maximum effect. So please note what I'm about to say is one part theory and another part practice. Okay, now you have to assess your opponent's team when using Psychic Blast, or better yet, using a Psychic Blast figure, because certain team compositions really can hurt a figure that has Psychic Blast. Mystic's Abuse is one in particular, definitely when you have very few clicks of Psychic Blast. Another team lineup that can affect Psychic Blast in a negative way is Stealth. Another one even more so, and it might not seem that way, is defense modification, either by granting energy shield to all of your teammates or by modifying defense values. So those two elements can be ridiculous. Those elements can be ridiculously hard on a player using Psychic Blast. Okay, so let's break it down. Psychic Blast's main advantage is that you can get past Impervious, Invulnerability, Toughness, or anything that says we reduce damage to blah. You can get past all of that, okay? The next advantage to Psychic Blast is that if you play it right in a balanced team, if whatever you have a problem to, a melee figure doesn't have a problem with that element. Stealth, melee doesn't have a problem with stealth. Energy shield deflection, melee doesn't have a problem with energy shield deflection. Okay? So what you need to sort of realize is Psychic Blast really should be paired always like a fine wine and cheese. You get it. Like a fine wine and cheese. Psychic Blast should always be paired with some melee option, whether it be super strength and hypersonic speed, or charge quake, charge blades, whatever you want, whatever you can fit in. That is your best option for having Psychic Blast on your team. Your goal of your Psychic Blaster is to go up against things that melee has a harder time with. Melee loves dealing with figures that have energy shield deflection, but melee really doesn't like going toe-to-toe with figures with Impervious. Melee doesn't really like dealing with figures with combat reflexes. So you might say, well, this is just general range theory. No. General range theory, you would still have a range figure without Psychic Blast have a problem against a figure with Impervious or Invulnerability. Now you might say, well, hey, exploit weakness, whatnot. And we'll get into exploit weakness later. But adding exploit weakness into your melee option with you having Psychic Blast already on the field is a little bit excessive, unless you really feel you need a second option to do so. And even still, Pulse Wave is a better secondary penetrating effect power than exploit weakness. Okay? So with Psychic Blast, we must remember that our main goal is just to pick out the damage reducing targets and just bombard them. We really want to look for a decent attack value, 10 or 11. We really can't afford in the common meta to have Running Shot, Psychic Blast, with 9s and lowers. Team abilities that you really need to try to pair your Psychic Blast with is having ultimates on the figure, teaming up with PD, Hydra, or any other figure team ability that can lower defenses. Outsiders, it will take away defense modifications so that you can get past energy shield deflection if you don't have melee on your team. Another option, great team ability for you to think about when you're building around for Psychic Blast is just any team ability that allows you to move and have it not count against your action total. And definitely this can, you might say like, okay, so why does Avengers and Justice League and all this stuff come into an advantage? Well, it comes into an advantage because the thing that we really find out when we're using Psychic Blast is Psychic Blast needs a lot of support. It really does. Just to make sure that that glass cannon can, really go boom. Okay, so you're going to be looking at 4-man plus teams, and you're going to need ability to get all those figures into position. So keep that in mind. Another team ability that you might want to consider is wild carding, so that you can, of course, copy cool team abilities such as like Batman TA or Superman TA or Ultimates or Avengers Initiative. Another team ability that you also might want to consider if you're dealing with a range heavy meta is League of Assassins and League of Assassins TA, and I think the Hand has the same TA. Is quite excellent in dealing with ranged options and ranged characters. All right, now, saying all that, what should I be looking for? What else should I be looking for with our Psychic Blaster? Primarily, running shot. Running shot is number one. You can't use hypersonic speed in Psychic Blast. The next thing that you need to be looking for is preferably sharpshooter. You want your Psychic Blaster to have sharpshooter so that no matter what, you can use your Psychic Blast. You do not want to be based if you do not have sharpshooter. And sharpshooter allows you to be effective all of the time. Another thing that you might want to look into, and I'm going to say the following things, they're not necessarily mandatory. Damage reduction, energy shield deflection, shape change, or super senses. All those things are okay. But with our Psychic Blast, the main thing that we're looking at is we are staying back. We are not trying to get in the mix of things. We are back, in the shadows, shooting our mental blast at people. Okay. So in doing that, our biggest defense is range. So you really prefer to have a 7+ range for your Psychic Blaster. Okay. And always try to hit the figure on the edge of your range so that you don't get bombarded. You're not trying to, really push your swing so that you can get into midfield unless you really have to, or you have a target that's going to get back to the medic or whatever if you don't kill them that turn. Another element that you really want to consider is multiple targets. Multiple targets on just about any range figure, adds cost, but it also adds a lot of value because all of your damage that you assign will be going through. So that can be considered as well. And then it also gives you the ability to say, if you hit the Hulk for 1 damage, he will be on a bad click versus, doing all the damage to the Hulk. Or you could say, like, I could deal 1 damage to Hulk and 2 damage to Thing, and that would cripple both of them versus me having to do all 3 damage to Hulk, which would put him back on a better click. So those are elements that you can really benefit from Psychic Blast in knowing, hey, this is my opponent's dial and having multiple targets. All right. Now, what I want you to do in training this time is I want you to do the melee attacker. Just find a cheaper melee attacker than your ranged Psychic Blaster. Okay. And I want you to just sort of set up a firing range. Find a map that best suits you. Okay. And I want you to build two teams. One 400-point team is your team, and I want the opposing team to be 500 points. And you might say, Dark Logos, isn't that a little bit weighted? Yes. The emphasis is doing 1-2 punches and also trying to pick figures on the opposing team that are clearly strong against Psychic Blast, but weak against a melee attack, and figures that are completely strong against a melee attack, but weak against a Psychic Blast attack. So that you can see about alternating damage and using Psychic Blast as a primary attacker, but also seeing what accents it in a melee range so that you can come up with some better team building designs. All right, that's pretty much it. And I will see you next episode.